Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Ranking the Albums. That's right, it's Sunday. And what do we do on Sunday mornings here in New York? We rank albums of cool bands that we love. And today, in the co-captain's chair, Mr. Nick Franco from the Hudson Valley Squares.
What's up? It's good to be here. I'm happy to be ranking one of my favorite bands.
All right, seriously, how many years have we talked about doing this? It's been a
We've
few.
talked about it for a while. I'm glad we're doing it. It's been a long time coming in the
Yeah,
planning.
it has been a long time coming. And I think, God, it's got to be at least 3 years we've talked about doing this. But I think at the time, we maybe thought that we'd get another Anathema album out, and they're pretty much done now. So it's like at some point, I was just kind of like, we just need to do this. And so here we
Yeah,
are. So yeah, the Great Anathema. Really cool, interesting British band that has a really bizarre history and for the most part has played music throughout their career that's almost indescribable. Just when you think you know kind of what they're doing, they completely change face and do something different, and then they do it again and they do it again. And revisiting this catalog has been fascinating because they're a band that I don't know about you, Nick. I don't listen to them all that often because this is like mood music. You really have to be in the mood to listen to this band. This is not a band you put on at a party. This is not a band I put on when I'm driving a 2 or 3 hour trip in the car. This is like kind of late night, just kind of chill out music. And to me, this is like listen to when you're alone music. That's kind of when I want to check out this band. It's like I don't want anybody else around. I want to just kind of lock myself somewhere and just play an album or two of theirs and just kind of like drift off into it. That's the kind of that's the mood that they put me in. I don't know about you if you feel differently about that.
I agree. Anathema is a band that absolutely began from a place of sort of like pain and suffering. They've had tough lives. They've come from Liverpool, England, working class family that's endured, and they are a family band. I think
Yeah.
that's what people might not realize is there's three brothers in the band, and then the drummer and his sister occupy the other part of the band, and they have managed to turn their own pain and struggle and suffering into some very relatable music that, yeah, is probably best enjoyed alone or with a couple of close friends or something. But yeah, they are a unique band, and they began as if you're not familiar with them, they're known as part of the big three of Death Doom from England, along with My Dying Bride and Paradise Lost. And like those other two bands, they've morphed into their own creative filters, but they did it, I would say, more bravely, maybe not bravely, but definitely, certainly more without fear. They just went off and did what they wanted to do.
Yeah, and in completely different style of music, you know. So as Nick mentioned, we've got the Kavanaugh brothers. So you got Daniel, Vincent, and Jamie.
Mhm.
Uh, Daniel and Vincent basically there from the beginning all the way through the catalog, and Jamie kind of popping in and out of the band numerous times over the years. You got John Douglas on and Daniel and Vincent lead vocals, backing vocals, guitars, and some keyboards. You got John Douglas drummer throughout the whole history of the band, also plays some keyboards. You got Lee Douglas, his sister, lead vocals. She became a full-time member of the band a little bit later on, like in the 2010s, starting from that point on, although she did pop up here and there doing some lead vocals or backing vocals on a couple of their albums. Daniel Cardoso played some keyboards. You got Les Smith played keyboards. Duncan Patterson on bass. They've had, a lot of people kind of doing keyboards and bass throughout their career, but for the most part, it's been a pretty consistent lineup of the band. So we got 11 albums. We're going to go through them and rank them all. Nick, why don't we do two at a time so we can kind of plow through it a little bit quicker? So you want to
Sure.
start us off with your 11 and 10?
All right. So yeah, I always had a rough idea of what it would be, but when I really sat down with, like always, it's fun to see where you actually put them. So my number 11 is Anathema's debut album, Serenades. And this album was their very first, and it is firmly within that Death Doom category of slow, really, really rough-edged music. I mean, definitely Death Doom. You could not put this album on and then listen to something they made 5 years ago and think that it's even the same band.
No,
One of-
not at all.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the reasons is the singer Darren White was, definitely a much rougher vocalist. And at that point, Vinnie Cavanaugh was just playing guitar, and it didn't last. It was just this first album. I think they were just young guys just trying to make their mark. Um, but you have the wonderful literary, painful lyrics, steeped in just a real literary cast of longing and misery, and that song called Sleepless is probably the best one on here, which they've remade a couple times. And yeah, it is what it is. It definitely didn't strike me back when I was getting into I didn't get into Anathema with this one, but it was just their first step. So we have that one. And conversely, my number 10 is 2014's Distant Satellites. Um, I thought that this one, following a period of intensely, just again, sometimes a band makes albums that are so good that the follow-up can sometimes, in your own mind, if your expectations are so high, can sometimes not be as reach that height. Highlights on this one, the beautiful song Ariel is just gorgeous. Lost Song Part 3. They were in a little two-album habit of making a song with the same title, part one and part two, to open the album. I thought this was the weaker of those, but still very good. They made an eponymous song, Anathema, which they kind of like their ode to the fans and all the pain and heartbreak that went into this career that they chose, and that they wanted to give back to the fans in that one. In fact, that's what I think they're saying. The title track is also very good, and it features like an electronic dance loop, which I know they were, again, this band is fearless. They prog, metal, rock, they obviously have a lot of different uh influences. But yeah, this one was good, but not my favorite. So it ranks number 10, Distant Satellites there. So those are my first two. Open it.
We're off to a good start. All right, let me bear with me a second, everybody, as I get my little Prezi app thing going. It always, when you do it the first time, it always takes a little bit extra. Um, all right, here we go. I think let's see here. I just want to get this correct. All right. So my number 11, come on, pop up. Oh, there we go. Okay, hold on. I lost it. Damn it. All right, should work now. Dun dun dun. There we go. All right. Alternative 4 is my number 11. So that's from 1998. This is their fourth album on Peaceville Records. This is kind of like a concept album. So it's based on a book by Leslie Watkins called Alternative 3, which is all based on like conspiracy theories. So lyrically, this is some pretty out there, crazy stuff. It's dark, it's moody, it's depressing. Got like Fragile Dreams, cool piece, nice guitar textures on that track. And I think Vincent's vocals are really starting to expand at this point in time because he went, and we'll get into this with some of the earlier albums, but like he basically took over the lead vocal slot after that first album, and he continued to do the kind of growl thing for a couple of albums, but here he's starting to do much more clean vocal styles. He's not quite the singer yet that he would become on later albums, but I think it's getting there. Empty is kind of gothic rock flavor, as is Lost Control. A song like Regret, I mean, it's just you listen to it and you feel the anguish of this whole thing. And the title track is kind of creepy. And then you got Better Off Dead and Goodbye Cruel World, which end the album on it, just like a complete downer. I think for me, I mean, this album that makes you feel like the final cut is like a party album by Pink Floyd. It's like I can hear the art on this album, but man, this is not a fun album to listen to. And I like darker music, but I listen to this album, I'm just kind of like, by the time you get done with it, you're like, oh my God, this is like really like kind of like heavy, depressing shit. But again, artfully done. But still, I
Yeah.
think for me, it's my least enjoyable out of all of these. So that's my number 11. And my number 10, all right, let me do this Prezi thing one more time here. All right, here we go. So I'm going to go with the first album. There we go. So Serenades, pretty much for everything you said. I think debut album 1993. It totally sounds like a different band. I mean, even from like the second album on, it kind of sounds like a different band. I mean, Darren White, it's okay, death metal singer, right? It's just very Holy Mother of Doom, growly thing. It kind of reminds me of, like you mentioned early, My Dying Bride, even like the first Cathedral album. I think I get, Forest of Equilibrium. I get a little bit of vibe there, although it's maybe not as heavy from a guitar standpoint.
Yeah.
There's also a little bit of clean vocals on here, but they're not very well done. I Made a Promise has some guest female vocals. That's kind of nice. I guess that would kind of hint at where they go next. Under a Veil of Black Lace, kind of funeral doom speaking. I mean, it's like it's a pretty good album for what it is. But I think like the Dreaming the Romance, which is this big kind of 23-minute long track, which is on various reissues of the album, which
Yep.
is just this big long ambient thing, which just doesn't
Yeah.
really go anywhere. It's just like a waste of time, in my opinion. So I think there's some cool stuff on here, but man, it's amazing. You listen to this album, you listen to any like the last four or five, and you'd be hard pressed to think it was the same band.
Right.
But for those who like that early 90s kind of death doom hybrid type of thing, it's a pretty cool album. And I know there's a lot of people who love this stuff. So, and I don't dislike it. I just think that this is, I when I reach for Anathema, it's definitely other albums, not this stuff. But for what it is, it's really good. So that's my number 10.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I think they were, like you said, there were hints of where they were going to go, but they were still, young and I think just trying to etch their foothold. So I agree. Um, they remade the song I don't want to say I Made a Promise, is that what it is in French? They remade that on Falling Deeper. It's one of the most beautiful things you'll ever hear in your life. So definitely something I recommend, better than the original. All right, moving along. My number 9 is The Optimist, their last album that they made. It's got some really beautiful songs on it. The title track, Endless Ways, there we go. And not the first time they've used a vehicle motif on an
I
album
know,
cover.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, this time the car's coming right at you. Springfield is a beautiful song. Yeah, exactly. A lot of beauty, lot of loveliness. They were it's really a shame that when the pandemic happened, that okay, this came out in 2018, and when the pandemic happened, they put out basically a notice that they couldn't hack it in that world. The band can't exist. They all have to survive. But the mental health of Daniel Cavanaugh, the guitar player, was degrading, and he has struggled with this his whole life. Some substance abuse, I think alcohol. He's been open about it. You can read about it, but I think last told, he's just not really in a good place at all, and it's a shame because I feel like the band was really vibrating on a beautiful level creatively. They've always created from conflict, from pain and loss, but this album was more peaceful. I felt it felt more settled, but it was good. It didn't blow me away. So now my number 8 coming up is the other vehicle motif cover. They have a Fine Day to Exit. And, this album, when it came out, there was a lot of controversy, not controversy, but just a lot of grumbling because I think, and as we've touched on, Anathema started out as a death doom band. They explored a very proggy side of themselves. They're huge Pink Floyd type of fans, but they were also fans of Radiohead, big time, Porcupine Tree, things like that. But now Radiohead is not a band that I like. I don't like them. I don't like the singer, any of it.
I don't either. They don't do anything for
Yeah, I
me.
mean, people love them, and that's fine. God bless, but it's not for me. And I think that's what rubbed a lot of Anathema fans the wrong way. They were still hoping for, some death related stuff, death metal related stuff. That's not going to happen. But if you look at this album, I mean, Pressure, um, Temporary Peace, it ends, and remember, like you were saying, the first album ended on this massive 20-minute thing. If you listen to Temporary Peace off this album, it's got one of the most beautiful acoustic, like, his voice, Kavanaugh's voice, Vinny Kavanaugh's voice is among the best, I think,
Yeah.
in music. And but that song devolves into just like sounds and ambiance. But I don't know if you've ever actually listened to the entire thing, but I used to fall asleep with headphones on a lot. And I'd say, thanks to the music that we listen to, I have scared the shit out of myself 100 times. If you keep listening to this, eventually, after the song fades away and
All the way at the end.
yeah, you start to hear somebody walking on a beach, like a rocky beach. You just hear the footsteps, and all of a sudden you hear other things, and then you hear this voice. Remember, these guys are British. That humor is always there. You hear this person say, "What about dogs? What about cats? What about chickens?" And he like repeats it. And I remember being woken up to that, like, what the fuck is going on? I didn't think I did any acid before I went to bed. So anyway, it's just a little secreted part of that album. But I think this album has aged okay. I think it was met with a lot of critical critique, but I think it was a good transition album from their prog tinge sadness into the realm that they would get into. I think it was a good album. 2001, Fine Day to Exit. So those are those two.
Cool. Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of bands around that same time were doing that. You'd say, "Oh, cool, they have a 12-minute long track on the album. Awesome." And it's the last track, yes. And you start listening to it, and then like 6 minutes into it, it just fades into silence. And you're like, but there's 6 minutes left. And then you got to kind of fast forward to hear what little thing they throw in the end. I mean, they did it numerous times. So many
Yeah.
of the band, I mean, it got to a point where I think bands are like, all right, this doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
was a really big thing for a while. So yeah. All right, my number, what are we at? 9. My number 9. Let me get my thing going here. Is going to be Eternity from 1996, their third album. This is the first one I ever bought from the band. Also on Peaceville Records. They spent the first half of their career on Peaceville Records, the second half on Casco. Produced by Tony Platt. So by this point in time, the doom and death of the first two albums are pretty much gone. Replaced by lots of kind of keyboards and like atmospheric rock. This is kind of when I think the Anathema sound really started to really firm up of what we would hear from them going forward. I think like Sentient, which is the opener, is a terrific song. It's gorgeous. The piano, the synths, the liquidy guitar tones, really, really nice track. Angelica, again, very reminiscent of where the band would go in years to come. Really, really nice. You got some hard rockers on here though. The Beloved, I think, is one of the bigger up tempo songs on here. It's fairly heavy. Reminds some of the stuff on this album, Nick, reminds me of Primordial a little bit,
Mm.
especially in the way he's singing on this album, because I think that this is really the first album where Vincent is really trying to do more melodic vocals, and his singing reminds me of latter day Primordial. I think the way that Alan has been singing on more recent albums, I think is very similar to what Vincent was going through at this kind of time. So very, very cool stuff. 3-part Eternity is really well done. There's little bits of gothic rock on this album. So I think they were still trying to figure out what they were going to do going forward. But there's a little bit of prog. I think this is a good album. Title track is good, it's really good stuff. I like this album. I think it's pretty strong. And my number 8 is, all right, let me find that. Let's see here. Is the one you just talked about. Fine Day to Exit. So 2001. So this album is on Music for Nations. I forgot they spent a little bit of time on Music for Nations. So here, interestingly enough, on this album, we got the drummer, John Douglas, writing most of the lyrics on this album, which is interesting. It was kind of a shift up to that point. This is the first album with Les Smith on keyboards, who I think is a really good player. He adds a lot to those albums that he's on. This is very melancholy. Pressure's a good track. Release is really good, kind of somber. You got Breaking Down the Barriers, which is a really good track. And here you got Lee Douglas, his sister, singing alongside Vince. And I think they make a really good pair here. This is probably like the beginning of that like kind of partnership, which would work so well on the latter albums. Temporary Peace, again, one of these, again, it's that whole long track with like all this silence and whatever, yeah, whatever. What's interesting about this album, and I think the albums around it, is that I listened to it today, and I think with all that was going on at the time and even later on, because it's a little bit late in the game, but like this band, if they really came out with this type of material, like this album in particular, maybe the one before and the one after it, in like 1993, 94, 92, even when the Seattle grunge scene was at its biggest, I think this kind of melancholy, depressing kind of form of atmospheric rock would have really like clicked with people who liked grunge for those reasons. They liked hearing this more depressing, people singing this angst kind of vocals and things like that. And I think like by 2001, I think that was already kind of passe. And I think that's why this period in the band's history didn't really click with much of anybody because they were a little bit late to the game. So you have to wonder, Nick, if they would have did this type of thing very early on instead of the Death Doom, I wonder if there was a place for this within the mainstream because it's very easy to listen to. I mean, how much different is this than like what like Nirvana and Alice in Chains were doing? I mean, it's got that kind of vibe to it. It's dark, it's depressing, it's heavy in spots, it's atmospheric, it's gloomy, but it really was no audience for this on a grander scale at this time, which is kind of sad, right? This band always just didn't seem to fit in the time frame that they were in, which I think there's some missed opportunities here. Maybe it's down to record labels not doing their thing, or I don't know. But I just in revisiting this catalog, it just seems like no matter what era you look at, they were a little late to the game. And like you listen to it, it's like this is quality music, but it didn't really fit at the time that they were putting this stuff out. So anyway, that's my nine.
No, I think you're right, and I think there was some music with Music for Nations. I think didn't probably push them as much as it could have. I did read that they said that, but I don't know.
I mean, that's not a label that does that anyway, right? I mean, it's
Right,
Music
right.
for Nations, and that never a big label. A lot of good artists on their
Yeah.
roster over the years, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I always felt that they were so much more accessible than their reach.
yeah.
So that's for sure. All right. So what are we up to? Number
7.
seven. Yeah. So that for number 7, I have the beautiful cover, Natural Disaster.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, so now we have Lee Douglas, like you said, she is present on this. I wrote notes, but just like my school notes, there are all kinds of she sings the title track vocal for Natural Disaster. Um on their tour that I only saw Anathema once, and I was lucky enough to have met Vinnie Cavanaugh and Lee Douglas at Gramercy Theater in New York City. They were super, super nice people. And I'm sitting there about to, waiting politely to like have a chance to speak to Vinnie Cavanaugh, who was at the merch area. And you're thinking, all right, you don't want to be too much of a simp. You just want to like say something. And I'm thinking like, all right, let me have a plan what I'm gonna say. And I was just gonna say, hey man, I've been into you guys since '96 and just want to say whatever, whatever. The guy right in front of me, he goes, hey man, I've been listening to you guys since '93. And I'm like, damn,
All the way from the beginning. Yeah.
he blew me away. So what did I decide to do? I said, hey, Vinny, I was going to say I've been listening to you guys since '96, but that guy clearly has me beat. And he cracked up genuine laughter. Like, that was cool. He was very nice. And I'm talking to Lee Douglas, and she said through her own words that the guys would be hanging out at their place and they'd be talking their music or just hanging out, and she'd be over here doing something, doing the dishes, whatever, just doing her homework, whatever. And she'd be like singing to herself. And the guys one time were like, hey, you got a nice voice. And that's how it started. And then they brought her on a few songs, and then before you know it, she was in the band. So I thought that was a really sweet,
That is a cool story. Like you said
genuine
earlier, this
story.
is like a family band, right? So why
Yeah.
wouldn't she be around, right? With her brother and they're good friends and
Yeah, really cool. So yeah, so the album. So Natural Disaster was they were much more firmly in that effervescent style of proggy. You never knew what they were gonna come out with. And the song Closer on here is really, really good. God forbid they should just list the songs so I can smoothly relay them, because of course I forget. But it had Electricity, which was a really painfully like a ballad of just Kavanaugh's pain just coming out. Um, it was good, you know, it didn't have um everything. It wasn't an even album for me, like, but the highs were really high. The final song one again is a massive called Violence, is a massive instrumental. And I will always have a connection to that song because when my daughter was about 7 years old, she started tinkering on the piano and she started taking lessons. And the guy giving the lessons taught her, she loved that song. When she was like 3 years old, she would make me put that on repeat, like where the piano comes in and then the music comes in, it's real crescendo.
Yep.
Anathema's good at writing like huge crescendo music.
Yeah.
It-
Yeah.
you know, like with, so my daughter, like, you know, was so affected by that. So I would have to play Violence on repeat to her, and she learned the piano bit. She learned the beginning part. And I was one of the, that's why this band has such a connection to my soul, you know, things like that. So yeah, right in the middle there, Natural Disaster, good album. And then moving right along, we're going to go to, for number 6, we're going to go to their second album, The Silent Enigma, with this beautiful painting,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
famous painting that I can't remember. And yeah, so right away in The Silent Enigma, you have Vinnie Cavanaugh taking over the microphone, and lo and behold, they got themselves a singer. And it really, you could, the song on here that I think just absolutely continues to blow me away is A Dying Wish. And you can really feel that Vinny was a singer, but he still had that death thing going on. And his voice on this is just so goddamn convincing. So they were all of a sudden so much more convincing. And, you know, you have what Sunset of Age, or what's the song I really love? Shroud of Frost is another just absolute killer in the Death Doom category. So I have no problem putting that one at number 6, Silent Enigma.
Cool. All right. My number 7 is going to be Judgment from 1999. So it's their 5th album. So this, I think, was the first on Music for Nations. And so by this point in time, you got bassist Duncan Patterson's left the band, and he was their chief lyricist, I believe, up to this point. Dave Fibus joins the band on bass right here. And also John Douglas, who was originally in the, John Douglas kind of popped in and out of the band a couple times as well. So he's back in the band full time, and he never left after this. And now we've got the Kavanaugh brothers basically writing most of the lyrics here. So, you know, I think the core Anathema sound really kind of happens with this album. And you got Lee Douglas appears on the 2 tracks. This is probably shortly after the time that Nick was talking about, where they were like, yeah, hey, maybe you should sing a little bit on some of our albums. So, and she would appear going forward from here. I really like Deep. I think it's a great, gorgeous song, really nice guitar solo, Pitiless. There's a little bit of alternative rock happening on this album too. Again, they're like, this is 99, so they're a little bit too late. So they kind of develop these things like after like a movement has kind of already happened. But it's a really, really good track. Forgotten Hopes is good. The title track reminds me of Pink Floyd. It reminds me of Marillion. It reminds me of Alice in Chains. Very cool song. It's got this big violent climax I really like. And Emotional Winter is outstanding vocals on that. Really, really good. I think it's a really strong album. You know, the one issue I have with some of their albums, Nick, is I think they're all really long. And it's like some of the early albums are like an hour and 5 minutes. And it's like, for me, because this music is so like emotionally draining to listen to, it's almost like an hour is too much. So I feel like on some of these albums, like, man, if this was only 45 minutes, it'd be such a tighter, little bit more, a little easier to kind of get all through. But what's really good is really good on here. So I can't fault it at all because I do like it. And my number 6 is the one you just talked about, which is A Natural Disaster. So again, 7th album, 2003. Jamie Cavanaugh comes back in the band at this point in time. And this is really his first official studio album with the band, because he was in like an early part of the band before they recorded the first album. And so this is his first official release on studio album. But I really like Harmonium is really good. Pulled Under on 2000 Meters a Second is faster and furious. A little bit different track for them. I kind of like that. Lee shows up on the title track. I mean, she's like pure gold. This woman
Mm.
is such a good singer, and she really fits with this style of music that they do. The best thing they ever did was bring her into the fold, I think. Flying's got some cool guitar harmonies, and I really like Violence as well. The first like 5 minutes before the kind of bit of silence is kind of violent. There's some cool things going on, and then you got these like this barely audible piano thing going on towards the end. Very, very cool stuff. I think it's a really good album. It's my number six. So good stuff. I love the album cover too. It's amazing.
Hell yeah. And yeah, we forgot to mention on Fine Day to Exit and Natural Disaster, they have Panic and the one you just said, Pulled Under 2,000 Meters a Second. Those two are very like these fast, like manic lyrics, like great lyrics. So that was, yeah, unusual. But yeah, they could proven they could still get up and make some up tempo shit.
Oh yeah, yeah. They didn't do it a lot, but they did. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. My number five we're at is
Yep.
the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Weather Systems. What year are we at now? 2012, I think.
Uh,
Yeah, something like that. Um,
2012. You got it.
yeah, the beautiful duo of Untouchable Part One and Part Two. You're seeing Vinnie Cavanaugh and Lee Douglas's vocals just, I mean, this is just beautiful, beautiful music. It goes right on. The Gathering of the Clouds is gorgeous. Obviously, there's a storm theme throughout the booklet sheet and the lyrical themes. Oh, I'd say the Storm Before the Calm is beautiful, and the beginning and the end to me is one of their best songs. Vinny's voice is another instrument. In fact, there's a moment in that song where his voice blends into the guitar solo, or vice versa, and it's just oh Lord, these guys could write a crescendo laden song, emotionally weighty. You feel like you're watching a movie, some darkling romance, tragic freaking drama. It's just they're just my God. So yeah, so Weather Systems is incredible. And now that we're into the top five, we're getting into royalty territory with me. Like just music that it's almost hard to put into words. So yeah, so my next one is Judgment. Number four. Uh they're definitely influenced by Pink Floyd. And I think so for me in the 90s when I was discovering all this black metal and violent dark industrial, all the directions my music tastes were going in, Anathema was like, oh yeah, remember in high school when you're listening to Pink Floyd, like, okay, this vibe exists. Somebody's doing this vibe very well. And Judgment is almost like you said, you got to be in the mood. Like there's times where it's just too much.
Yeah.
Um, One Last Goodbye might be the most beautiful ode to a lost loved one or lost relation. It's unclear. They of course keep the mystery around it, but it could the loss of anything dear to you. It will represent. Lee's Mercy, Percy and Moonlight, gorgeous. The title track packs that punch, like you said, where it starts out, you know, just the two little guitar notes. It is like a Pink Floyd, like The Wall, and it just comes crashing in. Anyone, Anywhere is just like the defiant not like self pity, but like really like hopeless but defiant kind of song. So the band, three of the members lost their mother right before this came out, or before the writing of it, I should say. So there was a lot of turmoil in their ranks. So it just all got poured out into this beautiful, beautiful, painful, wonderful thing, Judgment.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. My number five is The Optimist. 11th album. And as of now, I guess the final album, right? We'll see. K-Scope Records. I bought this when it first came out, produced by Tony Dugan. So with the album that came before it, which we haven't talked about yet, very reliant on like programmed synth patches and rhythms and things. It's a very modern sounding album. Very a lot of ambient textures. I mean, they were kind of going in that direction. But the songs are top notch, the melodies are top notch, and Vincent Lee and Daniel just absolutely killing it together on vocals. I mean, for me, this band became more of a band that I fell to love because of the vocals more than anything else on those last handful of albums. Yeah, there's some cool guitar work and there's lots of keyboards and synthesizers, but man, it was all about the vocals for this band. I mean, just so well done. Leaving It Behind is a great, catchy, upbeat rocker, really, really good. I mean, Endless Ways. Uh, Lee is she's amazing on this. And, the more you listen to that song, it's like in a perfect world, that's a smash international hit song. It's just so catchy, so good. The title track is great. I love the ambient instrumental San Francisco, which is really cool. Springfield is really moving. Ghosts is kind of floating and just kind of does its thing. Back to Start is so good. Really uplifting song. I think there's some really great stuff on here, but like half of the album is really, really mellow. It's really mellow, almost to the point of it's too mellow in spots, but it's still so good because they're just such good, like kind of at songcraft and just so good. So even though it's kind of a real kind of like mellow, atmospheric, ambient type of record, it's still really, really good. So I really dig it a lot. And then number 4, Nick, if you could hold up the Silent Enigma from 1995, that's their second album. So um, I think this is one of the best atmospheric doom death albums released in that time period. And it's amazing how different it is from the first album. It's just so much more kind of realized as a band. And you know what really is interesting here? So again, this is Vinny for the first time singing lead vocals in the band, and he's doing like mostly kind of growls, but also this kind of like anguished melodic style. I think it's like a combination of like Michael Ackerfeld from Opeth and Tom G. Warrior from Celtic Frost. And I'm talking specifically the way Tom was singing on the Into the Pandemonium album, where he's doing this, this kind of like anguish thing. And he does it
Yeah.
most of the album. I'm like, it's like, holy shit, that's Tom. That's that album. That's that Celtic Frost album, which a lot of us were kind of weird about when it first came out, because like, why is Tom singing that way? But the music, the songs are very depressing and slow and anguished, and it perfectly fits it. And it's the same thing here. There's some cool proggy moments on here. There's lots of atmosphere. There's big, heavy riffs. I mean, this is like epic kind of doom stuff. I mean, it's just long songs, and Dying Wish is so potent, so good. Shroud of Frost, like you mentioned, is really, really good. Alone is great. Sunsets of Age, really, really good album. One of the better albums of this style, I think, from that time period. So really, really good. But again, they kind of moved from this fairly quickly. But I think it's kind of like because this is also very different from that first album, even though it's still in that doom death type of configuration, but it's very different from the first album. There's definitely more atmosphere on this album, and there's better songwriting and really good stuff. So that's my number 4.
Yeah, good one. What good words. Absolutely true. It was much more realized and focused music. And yeah, and you had mentioned before about I think you were referencing, I forget which one, but with Eternity, you were referencing Primordial, and they were all friends. They were all friends from the early days. And Averill in Primordial even talks about playing some early show, probably in England somewhere. And he's like, yeah, there were only about 6 people at the show, and most of them were Anathema, which I thought was funny. So like they were all supporting each other in the early days and taking influence from each other. All right, so my number 3, excuse me, my number 3 is Eternity. Uh, so again, this is kind of where I came in. I mean, my friends and I got into probably Silent Enigma and Eternity around the same time. So for me, I was, yeah, the pain, like you said, man, you said it before, that opening song, Sentient, you even hear like the baby crying in it. That reminded me of like a birth, like a beautiful, so like right away you have this atmosphere that's created by very young musicians that just, what can I say? That there really wasn't anything else out there. They really had started to distinguish themselves even from, I'd say My Dying Bride is my other like favorite band from this type of style. Angelica the Beloved and Eternity Part 1 are just, I mean, there's just an opening salvo of phenomenal stuff. What can I say? Catchy, dark, had it all. So, a young, much more romantic minded 20-year-old Nick certainly had endured his share of heartbreak. And you can't always listen to Marduk. Sometimes, this really helps you get through it. You know what I mean? And then you put on the Marduk. But one of the cool little details on this album is they cover a song called Hope by somebody called Roy Harper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And wow. It starts with this literary speech clip from something that is really freaking deep, and you can really get lost in it. Again, it's a very Floydian type of thing. Back half of the album is wonderful. You have the unbelievable Radiance, Far Away, ends with Cries on the Wind. This is one that I will, for the rest of my life, I will just be able to put on when the mood strikes me, and it's wonderful. And that takes us to number two,
Yeah.
which right in line is Alternative 4 for me.
Wow. So the one that's too depressing for me is way up on your list, right?
You know me, man. You know I love sad shit. Yeah, this is just and remember, like, too, where I was in life, like I was only a few years removed from discovering Pink Floyd. And obviously that's a looking in the past band, because what I loved from them was in the past. And this was a way I was like, holy shit, like these guys are conjuring, to the point where it's like, man, this is like he was listening to The Wall and then recorded some of it. But I think, yeah, it's strong throughout. The song Regret has absolutely gotten me through some hard times. They're so relatable. Words and music by Danny Kavanagh. Danny Kavanagh was the creative engine of the band for a while, for most of their latter day stuff too, which when he's down in the dumps, like they're not going to be doing much. But at this time he was humming. And yeah, the whole fucking thing. Inner Silence, the beautiful with the keyboards, like Jesus Christ, could anybody make a more beautiful album? And as you said, Vinny's voice was really special at this point. It was coming into its own. So that is my second favorite Anathema album. Back to you.
Cool. And just to kind of tie in the whole Pink Floyd Roy Harper thing, I mean, it must have been a thrill for them to cover a Roy Harper track because Roy sang on Have a Cigar on Pink Floyd with Pink Floyd, right? So it's this kind of that connection, probably a thrill for them. So instead of covering a Pink Floyd track, they kind of went a little
Yeah.
detour, and that kind of works. Yeah, my top three are just, I love them. And this is kind of like the period where I really, really kind of fell for this band after kind of like fighting it for a while because they were this band that everybody in the underground was talking. It's like, oh, you don't listen to Anathema, you don't like Anathema. It's like, I got one of their albums, they're okay, yeah. It's like you really should get into them, Pete. You really should get into them, Pete. All right, yeah, yeah, yeah. And after a couple of years, I'm like, all right, I'll give these guys a try. And then I'm like, oh, so Distant Satellites, 10th album from 2014. K-Scope Records, produced by Christer Andres Sederberg. Got the other, again, they were so good at doing this in the latter stages of their career. They do these like multi-part tracks to open up albums. So here you got the Lost Song part 1 and part 2, and then they go to part 3 later on in the album. Really, really well done. I mean, amazing vocals, these big symphonic orchestral like keyboard orchestrations and things, like you said, big bombastic, these swells of just this really, really good. Ariel is just terrific. I mean, it's
That's my favorite.
basically Lee with piano and synth, and she's just amazing. Really, really good stuff. Take Shelter is a really good one that's kind of uplifting. I like Anathema. They all throughout their whole career, they never did a song title of the
About
band. And
themselves,
they
yeah.
finally did it now. Again, kind of like the Optimist. A lot of programming, a lot of just a lot of technology on this album. It's very, very modern sounding, maybe lacking in a little guitars for me, but man, the vocals and the orchestrations are so well done. I couldn't not put this as high as I did. So that's my number three. And my number two, I'm going to go with my number one and two was really hard for me to do because I love them both, but I'm going to go with the one that really, really sold me on the band. It almost pains me to put it at number two, but I'm going to go with We're Here Because You're Here,
Mhm.
the eighth album from 2010. It's their first album in 7 years, right? Came out it's on VN Records, right, or K-Scope, depending on where you were. Mixed by Steven Wilson. Last album featured Les Smith on keyboards. And now Lee is a full-time member of the band by this point in time, which is really cool. I mean, Thin Air is probably arguably the best song they ever did. I think Thin Air is, I mean, that guitar melody that keeps repeating at the beginning, the keys, the vocals are intoxicating. It's just amazing. I remember the first time I heard that song, this was after everybody's like, Pete, you got to listen to this band, you got to listen to this band. And then someone sent me a link to them performing this live, which I think was from their live album on YouTube. And I was like, holy shit, this is a great song. All right, I need to just investigate this band today. Even though I already had Eternity, right? But for whatever reason at the time, it never really clicked with me. So I just fell in love with the rest of this album. And there's just Summertime Horizon is so good. What is this? Is this prog? Is this art rock? Is this atmospheric rock? I don't know what the hell it is. It's just anathema, right? It's just, there's really no way to characterize this band. Angels Walk Among Us is so good. Get Off, Get Out is the one kind of rocker on the album, because later on in their career, they really didn't rock out all that much. You maybe got one or two tracks on an album. Yeah, Hindsight is so good. I mean, this is just an amazing album. The band is in full, like, kind of symphonic, atmospheric prog mode, if you want to call it that. And the vocals are just outstanding. The vocal arrangements is what really sells me on this band. So yeah, we're here because we're here. Could be my number one, like it's going to be for you.
Yeah, my number one.
Yep.
My process of elimination. Yeah. And for me, as a guy who really got into them, like my, the main thrust was these, right? And I loved where they went. I didn't, like I said, I was absolutely accepted where they went, but I was thinking, nothing's going to unseat those classic albums for me from my formative years. But this did. I had to put this at number one. And you said it. I think this album, We're Here Because We're Here, 2010. I think this fulfills the promise of everything they were working up to that point. I think, to me, it is their most perfect moment, I think. And again, there's extraordinarily personal. This album reached me personally in ways that it covered all the bases. The song "Dreaming Light," which I think that might be their best song ever. It's one of the best songs I've ever heard in my life. But one of the reasons is because this song came out right a few months before my daughter was born, and it became like that. If you listen to the lyrics, I don't know how this song is not about the impending birth of a child. If you've ever seen the video for it, it's a small child wandering around like a war zone. The video absolutely does not go well. I'm sure it does, but the video is so different from what you might expect. But this was like expecting my first child song. Really always will mean that to me. And the song "Everything" helped me get through the loss of pets. The way I swear to God, like we had right around that same time, unexpectedly lost a dog. And that song came in and helped me fucking heal through it, you know? And then what's the one after that? Jesus. Oh, Angels
Angels
Walk Among
Walk Among
Us.
Us. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
great.
the odes, like he's recalling out to his own parents,
Yeah.
and like that helps me get through like the decline and loss of my own parents. Like these a lot of bands write sad music, a lot of bands write wistful music, but how many bands can just reach into your soul, and just fucking lay it down?
Yeah.
So goddamn, that's like my favorite Anathema album. It's endlessly amazing. I think it is their greatest moment for me.
And it's the album that had everybody talking about them,
Yeah.
because again, they had been away for a while and they come back. And I think this is the album where really they utilize, I think, Lee in the fashion that she needed to be utilized. So I mean, we talk about uh everything, which has the both of them on there just feeding off each other, and it just like sweeps you away. And they knew they had a secret weapon, right? And they used it big time on this album. And everybody was talking about this album when it came out. It's like all of a sudden now Anathema became like a band that people above the underground could finally latch on to. I don't think it really caught on a mass level, which is a shame because it's a really, really beautiful album. Like I'm sitting here talking and I hear that dun, 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 of Thin Air going through my head. And it's like, and every time I listen to that, I can't get it out of my head for days. It's so good. Yeah, it's a great album. It could have been my number one too. It almost was. I went back and forth, back and forth. Ultimately, I went with Weather Systems
Yeah.
from 2012.
Great choice.
which is another beautiful album by them. You know, here Les Smith has left the band by this point in time, so the rest of the guys are all kind of taken on playing keyboards and programming electronics and shit like that. I mean, Untouchable is up there with one of my favorite songs by them. I mean, Vincent's vocals are just like, God, he reaches into you and he just grabs your heart right out and just like takes it away with him. It's just so good. And Lee sounds great on that too. It's just so good. Um, and again, what do you call this music at this point in time? I don't know what this is. Is it art rock? I don't know. I don't know what you call it. Atmospheric pop. I don't really know. I don't think it really matters. But man, The Gathering of Clouds, Lightning Song, Lost Child. I mean, just landscapes, just kind of internal landscapes, just kind of takes you out at the end of the album. I think to me, this is one of the most emotionally beautiful albums I've ever heard, I think. And you could probably say it about both of these to me,
Oh
because
yeah,
to
yeah,
me, they're like neck and neck. There's really not much. And tomorrow I could tell you that this is my favorite, but I think basically what I'm saying is to me, these two is
yeah,
for me is the pinnacle of this band. I don't think anything else really touches it and gets me right here like these two albums do.
yeah.
Really, 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 really great stuff. Great stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and it's true. I used to like to categorize my playlists, and I have like a black metal, death metal, whatever, whatever. And I always remember I couldn't put an ad. They just don't fit in anyone. You know, they just don't fit in anyone.
No, they don't fit anywhere.
Yeah,
They're really, really unique. And it's fun. I think there have been other bands since who have tried to kind of duplicate this sound a little bit. They don't quite get it. Um, I think you just have to have lived the lives that they've lived in order to be able to write and sing this type of stuff. It's just
yeah,
yeah. And will we ever see them do anything again? I don't know. It seems like they've kind of shut the door. They made an announcement a couple of years ago that they're basically that's it. But you never know. But
yeah,
I think they've got a career that they can look back on pretty fondly, and we'll see 10 years from now how people look back at this band. And I still think, and I've talked about it a few times in this episode, that they were a band that like had all the goods to be really, really big, but they just were never in the right place at the right time. It seems,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
kind of a shame.
Yeah, that's a fair analysis. And yeah, just to take this moment to just hope that Daniel Kavanaugh can find his way out of whatever mire he's in, because just so he, for the sake of his life,
Yeah.
could be good. And but yeah, to say that their music, just any testimonials from fans you hear, it's always like stuff we were saying about how it just, they have the ability, they can get you through personal tragedy. They don't sound like they're preaching. It's just so real. So that's a relative rarity
Yeah.
in rock-based music or any music.
Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Cool. So for everybody watching, if you are a fan, you know these albums well, rank them as you like them down in the comments below. We like when everybody plays along to kind of what we're doing here. And if you've never heard the band before, I think you've got lots of examples of where to start your listening career with Anathema. So anyway, I want to thank Nick for jumping on board and helping me out with this one. Like I said, it's been a long time coming, and I'm sure Nick and I will be doing something like this again in the not too distant future. And of course, you can see Nick frequently on the Hudson Valley Squares on Monday nights. So till next time, everybody. God, what do I got coming up on the ranking show next week? I don't know off the top of my head. I'll have to look at my calendar, but we will have a ranking the album show next Sunday, as we do every Sunday. So I think next Sunday is Michael Brecker. We're going to go down a little jazz route. I think it says that next Sunday. I'm not quite sure. It might be the week after that. But we got Michael Brecker on the calendar. We're going to do Creator. I've got Tia Carrera. We've got Badfinger, all sorts of other bands that are being worked on. So in the weeks ahead. So stay tuned for all that. And visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube all together. All the
All
damn
the damn
time.
time.
That's right. So stay tuned next Sunday for another episode of Ranking the Albums. For Nick Franco, I am Pete Pardo. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody. Have a good one. See you Monday on the Hudson Valley Squares. Bye bye.